This story is a work of fiction, inspired by real events. Names, dates, locations, and identifying details have been changed or dramatized to protect privacy and enhance the narrative. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental or used fictitiously. This content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not aim to glorify crime, promote violence, or pass judgment on real individuals. Viewer discretion is advised. Some scenes may contain mature, disturbing, or triggering content. What you are about to watch could have happened anywhere, to anyone. It's inspired by real events. Whispers of truth, buried beneath layers of fiction. We've changed the names, the dates, the locations, but the emotions, the betrayal, the fear, those are real. This story is not meant to accuse, only to reveal, to make you question, who do you really trust? If stories like this keep you thinking, long after they end, hit subscribe, smash like, and drop your theory in the comments. Now watch closely, before the truth disappears again.
The morning sun spilled across the kitchen tiles, catching the sound of Elena Martinez's laughter. She leaned against the counter, coffee in hand, the world outside moving in its quiet rhythm. On the surface, it was an ordinary Saturday. But Elena's life was never ordinary. Her husband, Daniel Martinez, was supposed to be behind bars, serving time for a violent assault that nearly left another man dead. The sentence was her proof that the world still had order, that justice still held. Prison walls were the reason she could sip her coffee in peace, the reason she believed her home was safe. To neighbors, Elena was joy personified. To family, she was the anchor. Yet beneath the warmth, she lived with an absence shaped like Daniel, a shadow always waiting at the edge of memory. She visited when the system allowed, wrote letters when silence became too heavy. She told herself he was still there, locked away, paying for what he had done. On that bright morning, she could not have known the truth, the walls she trusted had already opened. Daniel was walking free, and every smile she carried was seconds away from shattering. How does a marriage built on waiting collapse, not with a release notice, but with photographs the world can see before she does? Elena's home was a gallery of devotion. Photographs lined the walls, family barbecues, vacations, birthdays. Notes and doodles crowded the fridge, reminders of the people she loved most. Stacks of books tumbled from her bedside table, each one marked by scraps of paper she turned into bookmarks. Her life moved in rituals. Sunday calls to her mother. Wednesday dinners with her best friend. And always the letters, written to Daniel, folded carefully, mailed with the faith that someone on the other end still cared enough to read them. She told herself the silence was prison's fault, not his. Her community adored her. Neighbors trusted her with their homes, children ran to her porch, and her laugh carried over fences like a promise. Few would guess that every smile she gave was shadowed by the knowledge of what Daniel had done, and the sentence that should have kept him far away. But shadows began to stretch. A letter returned unopened. A prison visit cancelled with no clear reason. A friend asked if she'd heard of appeals shortening sentences. Elena brushed it off with a smile that faltered at the edges. The cracks were faint then, but real. She still clung to loyalty, still called herself his wife. What she didn't know was that silence had become something more than distance. It had become design. Elena believed patience was strength. But patience began to look like denial. The letters came back too often, stamped with "return to sender," as if Daniel no longer existed where he was supposed to. She smoothed them flat, stacked them neatly, convincing herself the system was careless, not deceitful. When she tried to visit, guards shifted uneasily behind their screens. "System error," they said. "Try again next week." She did. The same answer came. Each trip home, her hope thinned just a little more. Friends noticed. She laughed less, spoke of him less. One whispered, "What if he's already out?" Elena's throat tightened, but she dismissed it. The courts had given her certainty. Daniel was violent, he had to be locked away. Anything else was unthinkable. Yet pieces didn't fit. A Department of Corrections email bounced back, record not found. A newsletter described renovations in the very wing where Daniel was meant to be. And once, at a gas station, a neighbor swore they'd seen a man with his exact build, his uneven gait, the scar across his right knuckle. Elena smiled politely and said scars were common. But her hands trembled when she turned the key in her door that night. By evening, she sat at her kitchen table writing his name again and again, as if ink could anchor a man she could no longer locate. Patience had once been her shield. Now it was betraying her. And when the truth arrived, it would not come in a letter or a phone call. It would come in pictures. For 17 p.m. Elena opened her laptop. She meant to pay a bill, but her fingers typed Daniel's name instead, as if her body knew something her mind refused. 4:29 p.m. A government portal blinked back the phrase, "Not in custody." She entered the number again, slower this time. Same result. She took a screenshot, her heart pounding. 5:02 p.m. She dialed the prison. The recording looped endlessly before disconnecting. She called again. And again. Nothing. 6:11 p.m. A friend suggested social media. Elena hesitated, then searched. A photograph appeared. Daniel, in a gray suit, standing beneath an arch of flowers. A caption read, "To the newlyweds." 6:14 p.m. Her breath collapsed. She clicked. His face, unmistakable, turned toward a bride dressed in white. The smile he wore was the same smile he had once given her. 6:19 p.m. She scrolled through comments, tagged accounts, a venue name. She downloaded a picture and checked the metadata, the date, the city, the lens that captured it. Proof written into the code itself. 7:03 p.m. She paced her hallway with the phone pressed to her ear, her friend still on speaker but silent now, because language had no place here. 8:22 p.m. The first sweep of truth began. 3 anomalies stood out like bruises. 1. The government record stamped, "Not in custody." 2. A marriage license filed in Daniel's name, signed with a steady hand. 3. A credit charge from the wedding venue on a card she thought frozen long ago. 9:47 p.m. She opened another photo. Daniel's scarred knuckle was visible as he slid a ring onto his bride's hand. Familiarity cut deeper than any blade. 10:31 p.m. She found a live stream replay of the vows. His voice was faint, carried by bad audio, but the words were clear. He spoke as though these were the only vows he had ever made. 11:08 p.m. Papers covered her table, screenshots, registry documents, timestamps. Each one a nail sealing the coffin of her marriage. 11:31 p.m. She stared at the last photo again, Daniel kissing his new wife while a crowd cheered. The house was not whispering grief. It was screaming betrayal. Denial was Elena's first refuge. She spread the papers across her kitchen table, the screenshots, the registry printouts, the photos, as if sheer disorder might reveal a mistake. Theories came quickly. Maybe the database was wrong. A clerical slip, one more failure in a system already known for them. She called again. A second portal echoed the same words, "Not in custody." Perhaps it was mistaken identity. Another Daniel Martinez, another scarred knuckle. She leaned closer to the photo until her vision blurred. But she knew that hand. She had kissed it once, pressed it against her cheek. That kind of familiarity could not be faked. Impersonation? She almost wanted to believe it. But then the florist receipt appeared, tied to a card number she remembered from their first apartment. Identity theft didn't explain charges on accounts only Daniel could reach. Old photographs? No. Metadata told her otherwise. Each file carried a fresh date, like an alibi engraved into pixels. Her friend tried to comfort her. Maybe there was some explanation, something still hidden. But explanations had been stripped away one by one, leaving only the weight of what could not be denied. Daniel Martinez was free. Not a rumor, not a glitch, free. And while she wrote letters to a prison cell that stood empty, he had walked out into another woman's arms. She pressed her hands against the table to steady herself, but the wood felt foreign, cold. Theories had collapsed. What remained was not a puzzle. It was betrayal, raw and final. And in that silence, Elena realized something worse than the truth: she had been the last to know. The autopsy of betrayal was not performed with scalpels. It unfolded on paper, each document a wound opened fresh. Court transcripts told the first cut, a reduced sentence, the language of lawyers and loopholes. Exemplary behavior. Demonstrated rehabilitation. Words that shrank years into months, undoing the certainty she had carried. Parole records delivered the second. A board that had listened, nodded, signed. The ink of their approval gleamed under courthouse lights, dry and irreversible. While Elena baked bread for family dinners and folded laundry to fill silence, Daniel had been walking toward freedom. The third cut came in numbers, not words. A florist charge. A venue payment. A hotel deposit. All logged in accounts she had once shared, their digital fingerprints pointing back at him. Betrayal was not only emotional now, it was itemized. She sat hunched in a courthouse archive, the documents spread before her. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, her hands trembling as she traced Daniel's signature again and again. The same letters she had once written in love notes now stared back at her from forms that erased her. Digital evidence sharpened the picture. Metadata in wedding photos placed Daniel under flower arches on the same nights Elena had been waiting for prison calls. A live stream replay carried his voice, faint but unmistakable, promising vows as if his past had never existed. Her family gathered around the table that night as she laid out the proof. Her mother wept into her scarf. Her brother's face hardened into silence. Shock turned into rage, not only at Daniel, but at the system that had left Elena carrying a ghost marriage while her husband built another life in daylight. The paper trail was complete now, each page a nail, each receipt a hammer strike. Together they built a coffin for the life she thought she had. Elena closed the last file with hands that no longer shook. For weeks she had been patient, for months loyal, for years believing. Now patience was finished. The truth no longer lived in paper. It lived in faces, in voices, in choices that would demand answers. And sooner or later, she knew, she would have to stand in the same room as Daniel again. The first leak was small. A blog post, grainy screenshots of parole documents, whispers of a quiet release. Most dismissed it as rumor. But within hours, bigger outlets picked it up. By morning, Daniel Martinez's name was on every front page. The scandal carried weight not because of his past, but because of his present. He had married into an influential family, one accustomed to respect, power, and spotless appearances. Now photographs of their perfect wedding stood side by side with court records of violence and parole loopholes. At first, Daniel's camp pushed back. His new in-laws issued a statement about forgiveness and moving forward. Daniel himself remained silent, letting polished spokespeople speak for him. But silence is brittle when the world is watching. Then Elena spoke. She sat in a studio, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, her hands steady as she held the returned letters up to the camera. She spoke of years spent writing to a man she believed was locked away, of discovering his wedding on a stranger's feed. The producers let her words stand without interruption. Her voice did not shout. It did not crack. It cut, calm, sharp, impossible to dismiss. Within hours, the storm grew teeth. Headlines screamed. Commentators demanded answers. Talk shows replayed her interview alongside the smiling wedding photographs. Daniel's silence was no longer strategy. It was guilt, playing out in real time. The trial had not yet begun. But the world had already decided it wanted blood. The event was meant to be another polished appearance, Daniel at his new bride's side, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. But this time, the crowd was different. Reporters shouted questions laced with accusation. Why didn't you disclose your release? What about your first wife? Then Elena stepped forward. She pushed past shoulders, her stack of documents clutched tight. For a moment the cameras turned, from Daniel's smile to her face. Daniel, she called, her voice cutting through the chaos. He froze, caught between charm and fury. You told the world you were locked away. You left me to write letters to a cell that was already empty. And while I waited, you built another life. The press surged, microphones swung closer, flashes went wild. Daniel's jaw tightened. He forced a smirk, muttered about lies and bitterness, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Elena, he said through clenched teeth, this isn't the place. But it was too late. The place was everywhere. The confrontation streamed live, replayed instantly on feeds across the country. The crowd saw not a redeemed man but a fraud unraveling. Then the final blow. From the edge of the crowd, plainclothes detectives stepped forward, badges raised. Daniel turned, confusion twisting to rage. He tried to wave them off, to lean on influence, to argue. The cuffs snapped closed. The crowd roared with questions, flashes exploding like lightning. In that moment, Daniel Martinez wasn't just a husband, or a groom, or even an ex-con. He was a man stripped bare before the world, undone not in a courtroom, but in the glare of cameras and the voice of the woman he had erased. The courtroom was a theater of silence. Every seat filled, every pen poised, every breath waiting for an ending no one could script. Daniel Martinez sat at the defense table, his hands clasped tight, the scar across his knuckle red from constant rubbing. For the first time since his release, he did not smile. The prosecution stacked their staircase stone by stone. Parole transcripts. Marriage license. Florist charges. Metadata. Each piece fell heavier than the last, pressing Daniel into his chair until even his lawyers stopped meeting his eyes. Elena's voice bound it all together. She spoke of writing letters that came back unopened, of years wasted in faith, of discovering betrayal in photographs shared with the world. Her voice trembled once, then steadied into steel. The defense clawed at doubt. Clerical errors. Miscommunication. A system at fault. But the jurors weren't watching the lawyers anymore. They were watching Daniel. Watching the man who once smirked in the press pit now shifting in his seat, jaw tightening, fingers trembling, sweat sliding down his temple. When the jury filed back, the room held its breath. The foreperson rose. The silence grew unbearable. Then a single word cracked it open, guilty. Daniel's mask shattered. His lips trembled, his shoulders slumped. He muttered curses under his breath, but they landed flat. The judge's sentence followed, heavy and final, 50 years to life. The gavel came down like thunder. Around Elena, her family wept, grief, rage, relief blurring into one. But she did not cry. She sat very still, her hands folded, her gaze steady. For once, she was not the erased woman, the forgotten wife, the silent victim. She was the witness who had spoken, the survivor who had turned betrayal into truth. When she walked out of the courthouse into a sea of cameras, she did not flinch. This time, the light belonged to her. This story was never about Daniel's freedom. It was about Elena's fight to reclaim her voice in a world that tried to erase it. And now, it's your turn. What would you have done if you discovered the person you trusted most had built a second life in plain sight? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories where betrayal, justice, and survival collide.